Hello everyone. A sweltering summer afternoon in a small Japanese town suddenly turned into the scene of a shocking crime. A doorbell ringing in the quiet neighborhood marked the beginning of a brutal event. A mother and daughter were attacked inside their own home, leaving the daughter fatally injured and the mother severely wounded. Shortly after, the perpetrator fled with stolen money, leaving the community in disbelief. The tragic case in Imari not only claimed the life of a kind woman, but also sparked lingering fear surrounding the identity of the killer and the true motive behind the attack. In this video, Vietnamese Case Files invites you to revisit every key detail of the murder case that has shaken Japan in recent days. Please note that all information presented today has been researched and compiled from various sources, especially official news outlets and documents from the courts and government. If there are any inaccuracies or points that should be corrected, feel free to comment below so we can update and improve the content. And if you believe this case deserves wider attention, please help us share the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so you won't miss our upcoming true crime stories. Thank you for your support. On the afternoon of the 26th of July, 2025, the peaceful Nagahama neighborhood in Higashiyamashiro Ward, Saga Prefecture in southwestern Japan, was shattered by the cries for help of an elderly woman. Covered in blood and clutching a wound on her neck, she ran outside seeking assistance. Nearby residents immediately called the emergency police line, 110. Within minutes, the sound of police sirens and ambulances echoed through the narrow street. But the first responders arriving at the scene could not have imagined the horror awaiting inside the house. When officers forced the door open, an alarming scene appeared in the fading afternoon light. At the entrance, a woman around 40 years old lay motionless. She had suffered multiple injuries, and blood had spread across the floor. Nearby, investigators found her 70-year-old mother, the same woman who had escaped to the neighbor's house, collapsed from blood loss. Paramedics rushed the surviving mother to emergency care while police secured the scene and searched for any trace of the attacker. The perpetrator had already vanished, leaving behind 2 victims and a ransacked home. For investigators, the immediate impression was the suddenness and brutality of the attack. A quiet residential home in broad daylight had become the site of a violent assault. The victim, lying right at the entrance, suggested that the attack was swift, occurring the moment the door opened. The mother's severe injuries also indicated that the assailant targeted both women without hesitation. The crime scene showed signs of struggle and household items disturbed, possibly due to the attacker searching for valuables or during resistance from the victims. Notably, no weapon was found at the scene, indicating that the perpetrator had taken it when fleeing. All evidence pointed toward a likely case of murder accompanied by robbery. Investigators understood they were in a race against time. A dangerous offender was still on the loose, capable of harming innocent people for money. Once the victim's identity was confirmed, the case began to take clearer shape. The woman found at the scene was Mukumoto Maiko, 40 years old, a single Japanese woman and the daughter of the elderly homeowner. She had moved back to live with her mother in Imari to care for her in old age. To neighbors, Maiko was known as a gentle, kind, and responsible person. She had no conflicts with anyone, making her death even more heartbreaking and difficult to comprehend. Professionally, she was an experienced Japanese language teacher in the region. She taught in community Japanese classes for foreign residents and also worked as a freelance translator thanks to her strong language skills. With a compassionate heart, Maiko helped many immigrants overcome language barriers and adjust to life in Japan. Maiko's family included her elderly mother and an older sister who lived elsewhere. The sisters grew up together in Imari and were very close. Upon hearing the devastating news, the older sister rushed home in shock to handle the arrangements. Maiko's friends gathered to support the family, deeply mourning the loss of a kind-hearted woman. They remembered her as modest, dedicated to teaching, and someone who never quarreled with anyone. At the time of the incident, Maiko had simply been spending a quiet weekend afternoon with her mother. They were likely having afternoon tea or preparing a simple early dinner together. No one could have imagined those would be the final peaceful moments of her life. The tragedy stole from her mother a devoted daughter, from her sister a beloved sibling, and from many foreign students a caring teacher. The Imari community grieved profoundly for Maiko, a gentle soul taken away without warning. Looking into her background, police reaffirmed that she had no personal disputes that could have led to the attack. There was no prior connection between her and the assailant. She appeared to be an unfortunate victim targeted by a stranger in a sudden violent act. This truth made the case even more painful, as it underscored how such an incident could happen to anyone through tragic chance. The 70-year-old mother became the key witness. Despite her immense emotional trauma, she tried her best to recount what had happened. According to her, at around 4:20 in the afternoon that day, the doorbell rang. When Maiko opened the door, an unfamiliar man forced his way inside. He threatened them and demanded money. In short, simple Japanese phrases. Maiko was attacked almost immediately, and as the frightened mother rushed to help her daughter, she was also injured. The calm household was thrown into chaos within moments. Based on the mother's fragmented memory, everything happened in just a few minutes. The assailant acted quickly and fled as soon as both women collapsed. He escaped with a small amount of stolen money and the weapon he had used. As soon as he left, the mother gathered the last of her strength to reach the outside and call for help. Her determination not only saved her own life, but also brought the incident to light. The information she provided was extremely valuable. The assailant appeared to be a young man around 20 years old, slim build, with short black hair on the sides, wearing a black t-shirt, brown pants, a face mask, and speaking Japanese imperfectly, possibly a foreign national. She emphasized that she had never met him before. This detail supported the police's early conclusion. This was likely a random attack with the intent to steal, not a targeted killing based on personal grievances. The forensic examination on the night of the 26th of July confirmed that Maiko suffered multiple serious injuries that caused rapid, fatal blood loss. The nature of the wounds suggested the attacker intended to cause severe harm rather than simply intimidate and flee. This escalated the severity of the case, prompting Saga police to mobilize their most experienced units to track down the perpetrator. The scene was secured tightly, and no detail, no matter how small, was overlooked. Forensic specialists carefully collected fingerprints, blood samples, and shoe impressions from the victim's house. Strange fingerprints found on the door handle and several objects were compared against the foreign resident database, as Japan stores fingerprints from all non-Japanese entrants upon arrival. While awaiting results, police urgently reviewed security cameras in the surrounding area. Fortunately, although the neighborhood was semi-rural, some nearby homes and shops had CCTV installed. Footage from the afternoon of the 26th of July was analyzed in detail. As expected, investigators spotted a young man wearing a black shirt moving quickly through a small road shortly after 4:20 in the afternoon, the approximate time of the incident, heading from the victim's home toward the main street. His build and clothing matched the surviving witness's description. Notably, another camera from a nearby residence captured the man heading toward an area with several dormitory blocks used for laborers and trainees. Through this footage, police also identified his escape route from the victim's home, cutting through a narrow alley, crossing a dirt path, and entering a trainee's dormitory complex. Along the way, he deliberately avoided main streets, preventing clear views of his face and evading public cameras. Though risky in broad daylight, the escape showed familiarity with the area. This reinforced the theory that the suspect lived nearby and knew the local pathways well. Investigators grew uneasy at the possibility that the attacker was still living normally within the community. With this crucial clue, Saga police shifted their focus to foreign residents living around the crime scene. Through discussions with local authorities, they learned that about 600 meters from the victim's home was a dormitory for foreign trainees working for a regional agricultural company. This immediately became the central direction of the investigation. A distance of 600 meters, just a few minutes walk, would explain how the perpetrator could disappear so quickly without using any vehicle. It also aligned with the idea that he knew the area well enough to flee without being detected. On the night of the 26th of July and the morning of the 27th of July, officers canvassed the trainee dormitory. A list of foreign men aged 20 to 30 living there was quickly compiled. One name stood out: Duy Khang, 24 years old, Vietnamese. His age, physique, and especially his short sides haircut all matched the witness description. According to the dormitory manager, Khang had lived there for more than 2 years and worked for a local agricultural company. Suspicion deepened when investigators learned that Khang had the afternoon of the 26th off. Several coworkers said he had been alone in his room around the time of the incident, meaning he had no solid alibi. Meanwhile, other trainees had been at work or in shared areas with witnesses to confirm their presence. At this point, suspicion focused squarely on Duy Khang. By late afternoon on the 27th of July, with indirect evidence mounting, police decided to approach him. At 7:12 in the evening, officers knocked on his dormitory door, requesting his cooperation with the investigation. Confronted by authorities, Khang appeared calm. He voluntarily accompanied officers to the station without handcuffs and without formal charges. With the help of a Vietnamese interpreter, police began preliminary questioning. However, Khang remained distant and silent. Questions about his whereabouts and actions the previous afternoon were met with evasive answers or complete silence. When asked directly, "Do you know anything about the incident at Miss Mukomoto's home?" he simply replied, "I don't want to say anything," and lowered his head. The smooth denial and uncooperative attitude only deepened investigators' suspicion. It increasingly seemed they had identified the right person. Now, they needed direct incriminating evidence. During the night of the 27th and early morning of the 28th of July, police executed an urgent search of Khang's dormitory room. There, decisive evidence emerged: a blood-stained knife found among Khang's belongings. The blade measured about 13.5 centimeters, matching the type associated with the victim's injuries. Forensic testing confirmed the blood belonged to Maiko Mukomoto, and skin DNA recovered from the handle matched Khang's profile. Shoe impressions found at the scene also matched Khang's shoes. Police additionally recovered his black clothing, which had been washed but still retained faint brownish traces suspected to be blood. At the same time, fingerprint comparison returned a perfect match. Moreover, Khang's wallet contained roughly 11,000 yen, determined likely to be the amount taken from the victim's home, totaling about 12,000 yen in all, equivalent to approximately $85. The combined physical evidence now formed a complete picture identifying Duy Khang as the perpetrator. At approximately 12:15 a.m. on the 28th of July, the Saga Prefectural Police officially arrested Duy Khang on charges of homicide and robbery. Within just 31 hours of the incident, investigators had apprehended the suspect in the community, a remarkably swift resolution that reassured the public. At a dawn press briefing on the 28th of July, a representative of the Saga Police announced, "We have arrested a 24-year-old male trainee of Vietnamese nationality living near the scene for homicide, robbery, and unlawful entry." The suspect's identity was then released: Duy Khang, 24. The media reacted strongly. The perpetrator was not an outsider, but someone living just nearby, a foreign trainee integrated into the neighborhood. Residents of Imari were further shocked to learn that the attacker had been living openly among them, passing through familiar streets daily. After his arrest, Khang was taken to the Imari Detention Center for temporary holding and questioning. Throughout this period, he remained silent and refused to answer anything regarding the case. Experienced investigators continued questioning him with interpreter support, but Khang repeatedly responded, "I have nothing to say." By then, objective evidence had already spoken in place of a confession. The bloodstained knife, fingerprints and DNA, and the surviving witness's statement had drawn an unmistakable picture. The case, Khang believed, was perfect, unraveled piece by piece, bringing him to justice. Duy Khang, 24 years old, from Vietnam. He had come to Japan under a technical trainee program and had lived in Imari for roughly 2.5 years, within a 3-year labor dispatch contract. In Imari, he worked for an agricultural company, specifically at a vegetable farm on the city's outskirts. His daily work involved harvesting and sorting vegetables inside greenhouses, requiring physical stamina and diligence. According to his supervisors, Khang worked well, was quiet, hardworking, and caused no trouble. His trainee salary was around $1,300 to $1,500 USD per month, enough for frugal living and to send some money home to his family in Vietnam, though certainly not a generous income. He lived with about 6 to 7 other Vietnamese trainees in a dormitory near the farm. That dormitory was only about 600 meters from Maiko's home, a short distance linking two individuals who otherwise had no connection. Regarding his family background, Duy Khang was born into an ordinary working-class family in Vietnam. Like many other young Vietnamese, he dreamed of changing his life by working in Japan. However, to join the trainee program, he had to pay a large brokerage fee, which could reach several thousand USD. In reality, many Vietnamese trainees begin their time in Japan already burdened with this debt, forcing them to work relentlessly for 1 to 2 years just to pay it off. It is unclear whether Khang was in this situation, but investigators suspect financial hardship may have contributed to his reckless decision. In terms of personality, Khang was described by coworkers as quiet and reserved. He rarely socialized, hardly drank, and did not go out much. During his free time, he usually stayed in his room scrolling through social media on his phone. Some roommates said he shared very little about his personal life, so no one was truly close to him. Police are currently analyzing data from Khang's phone and computer to determine whether he experienced psychological pressure or any major emotional changes before the incident. There is no information suggesting he had mental illness or a criminal record in Vietnam. It is likely he had never broken the law before. This case appears to be the first time Khang crossed into criminal behavior. He had no personal relationship with the victim, Maiko Mukumoto. As previously established, Khang was not her student and did not know her family. He simply lived nearby and selected her home as a target. Therefore, this was not a crime driven by personal hatred, but by greed and circumstance. The direct motive was identified as theft for money. However, investigators and criminologists believe the deeper motive may be more complex. Suppressed frustration, hopelessness, or emotional instability stemming from the difficulties of living abroad may have built up over time, pushing him toward losing control. More broadly, Khang is one among tens of thousands of young workers who leave Vietnam for Japan hoping for a better future, but face harsh realities. Demanding labor, low income, high living costs, cultural and language barriers, and at times feelings of isolation or discrimination in a foreign land. These pressures can overwhelm individuals without adequate support. Of course, tens of thousands of others continue working honestly despite these hardships. Only Khang chose the worst possible path. But such circumstances partly explain how a young foreign worker with no criminal past could lose his way so drastically. For this reason, the case is not only a tragedy for the victim's family, but also a tragedy for Khang himself, transforming from an immigrant worker seeking a better life into a criminal whose actions shocked a community far from home. As of the 28th of July, 2025, the case is still in the investigative phase and has not yet entered trial. However, given the overwhelming evidence, Duy Khang will certainly be prosecuted for extremely serious charges: murder, robbery, and unlawful home invasion. Under Japanese law, the crime of murder combined with robbery is among the most severe, carrying a maximum penalty of death or life imprisonment without parole. The Saga Prefectural Prosecutor's Office will likely pursue the highest possible charges, as Khang's actions were violent and brutally ended the victim's life for a despicable motive. Although Khang is exercising his right to remain silent and denies involvement, the physical evidence and eyewitness testimony are overwhelmingly against him. The defense may have few options beyond attempting to mitigate the sentence. They may argue that Khang acted under severe emotional disturbance or impaired judgment due to difficult personal circumstances, hoping to avoid the death penalty. They may also claim that Khang did not initially intend to kill, but only to steal, and that he stabbed in panic, though this argument is unlikely to hold, given the numerous wounds on the victim that clearly indicate murderous intent. Another factor that will certainly be raised in court is the defendant's level of remorse. So far, Khang has shown no regret or apology. If he maintains this attitude, Japanese courts may consider it unfavorable. Conversely, if he eventually admits guilt and expresses remorse, it may serve as a small mitigating factor. However, due to the brutality of the crime, the Japanese public will demand the harshest punishment. The death penalty is entirely possible, especially since the victim was innocent, the motive selfish, and the offender has no exceptional mitigating circumstances. While the final verdict has not been issued, looking at similar cases in Japan, it is likely that Duy Khang will face a very severe sentence. It may be life imprisonment without parole or even the death penalty, depending on his attitude and the court's assessment of the crime's cruelty. Japan is known for having a strict justice system, particularly in murder cases involving robbery. Whatever the outcome, one thing is certain: justice will be served, and the perpetrator will face the consequences he deserves. And you? What do you think Khang's sentence will be in Japan? Share your thoughts with Vietnamese Case Files in the comments. And if you found today's story compelling, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files to follow more extraordinary cases in the future. Goodbye, and see you next time.